Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Corner podcast with myself, Max. I'm your host today. Creative Corner aims to bridge the gap between leaving a place of study and finding that first job within the creative industry, whether that be under freelance, perhaps, or going under an agency or anything else that fits into that ilk. My guest today is Luigi, and we're going to be talking to him very shortly. Because I didn't do it last podcast, I forgot to plug like the Life Proof social media in the last podcast. So Life Proof is at Life Proof UK, and you can go follow them all across all the social medias for updates on job opportunities, networking events, and lots of other good stuff on there as well coming in the new year, coming this year. So yeah, so without further ado, Luigi, welcome to Creative Corner. So my first question for you is who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. My name's Luigi. I am at the moment freelancing as sort of like a motion designer with backgrounds, sort of graphic design, some like basic illustration concept, and I even studied computer science when I was back in college.
Yeah.
Basically, my whole background in terms of how I came to become an artist, how I even got into the industry, particularly motion graphics. I went through pretty much all of secondary school and college, like doing more computer science stuff or computer orientated stuff. And sort of by the end of that, I ended up doing a foundation course, which basically explored everything from like doing clay, fashion, motion resistant materials, and animation.
Wow.
So yeah, that foundation course had a huge, like broad choice, and decided to sort of specialize within animation because I thought, oh, this combines some of the elements of computer science that I enjoyed, which is sort of creating like visual things that I can play with physically and I'd get like an instant result. And yeah, combining that with sort of the graphical elements that I also enjoyed because I took like graphic psychology and computer science for my A levels. That sort of culminated all nicely into animation. And I'm at university at the moment. And throughout uni, I've basically just been trying to develop my style with animation, trying to learn more about it. But because animation is so broad and what you can do, much like graphic design, which is the course I'm currently on, I decided to sort of specialize in 2D and particularly pixel art because I love like old retro games. I love the whole aesthetic, I love the coloring, and also just like the simplicity of just how minimal it is. It's still as difficult to do as some like professional portrait because you're doing the opposite of adding detail. You're subtracting detail, and it still needs to look good.
For sure, right?
Yeah, it's just basically that's how I ended up here. Nothing was planned. It just kept going from one stage to the other, and just pivoting my ideas around what I wanted to be. Because if anything else had happened in my life, I may have ended up as a programmer, could have ended up as strictly graphics, but I'm here doing graphics and pixel art at the moment, which is quite nice.
Yeah. So interesting that you bring up like sort of discovering it in school, like animation alongside computer science as well, and how they sort of cross paths a little bit. Was there a time before that when you were creative? Were you creative as a kid? Was that, or was it something that you just discovered at school?
I would say I was quite creative. Like, I definitely wasn't like enjoying all the academic style of stuff. Like, where I was like, oh, you need to memorize this, memorize that. Like, it wasn't bad, but I was always leaning towards something a bit more creative or open, which is why things like computer science or back in secondary school, graphic design wasn't really a thing. We only had to call it like art or like digital communication or media studies, because those were like the main ones we could take. With those, I sort of found like a liking to sort of understanding what makes people sort of tick, and like hence why I took psychology later. So the whole sort of thing of trying to make things believable and people to actually connect with it, which has always interested me. But like, as like creatively, I've always wanted to engage like people within my work or some kind of interaction. Hence why with computer science and some of the branches within computer science, you obviously have things like web design or user experience design, or even like user interface or app or games. There's so many different levels of it that you could actually create things for someone and they would interact with it. And you could potentially, change their perspective or something, or like change their opinion just by making an app. So that little concept of communication is pretty much what led to me like ending up in a graphic based sort of medium. Well, in this case, it ended up being animation, which is sort of turning basically static images or just anything, because it doesn't necessarily have to be digital. It could even be like just moving objects around, which is also still considered animation. As long as you're communicating a message, that's what sort of pushed forward all sort of like my creativity stuff from a young age. It was always wanting to communicate some sort of message, and connect with an audience. That's basically like how it started from a young age. Yeah.
I think animation is because my background's in graphic design. So when I think about animation for me is a next step above everything else. I hold it quite highly. Like if you can animate, in my eyes, you're very, very talented and have this like idea that you can bring logos to life. And when I've spoken to friends that are also graphic designers, and we talk about like visual identities and how a typeface works and how they marry up together, and what we're looking at is static 2D imagery, and so occasionally it'd be like 3D illustration or something like that. But if you can animate that, and you talk a lot about communication in that answer there, and bringing that animation into this brand, into whatever it might be, into a piece of art that you just choose to animate, it almost adds like a whole nother layer of like, this is why you should pay attention to me, almost. I think that's quite interesting. Do you agree with that to some respects?
Oh, definitely. Particularly with the whole thing of taking it to the next level. For me personally, adding any sort of personality to a logo, it just adds so much connection, like as a consumer and obviously as a producer of the work. Like if I saw a company that I liked, you know how Apple at the moment's got the whole new Face ID campaign, where it's like the letter I and the D, but they've animated it so like it winks at you and does like funny faces at you, using sort of just letters basically in basic typography. That to me was like, oh my god, that I connect to that. Like I feel like Apple's caring for me, even though they don't. Like we all know, they just want us to pay for stuff. It's like companies nowadays are trying to become more humane, or at least trying to look more organic, rather than just faceless corporations that, it used to matter more back in the day. If you had big advertising that were just trying to sell. Now it's more companies, big, small startups, or even us as freelancers, like connecting to an audience using some form of like personality within the branding identity, your website. Because even like basic animations on a website where like some guy could be like, oh, hello, welcome, or something like that. That connects to people on like a deeper level, because it feels familiar than just like a static image. And obviously, like in a sea of logos, like certain animations can stick with people depending on how it's communicated. Again, it just goes back to how the logo is then used, like the essence of what the logo is, how that's communicated through, to basically just, again, take it to the next level and deeply communicate and connect with his audience. So yeah, animation definitely does help.
So interesting that you bring that up, like when we think about companies trying to be more organic, like you say, and trying to reach out to us because they want our attention, right? And having like an animated logo or having some sort of moving imagery, we as humans are drawn to that. And there's probably something on a Homo sapien sort of level where, hunter-gatherer humans would react to movement. I imagine it's probably something along those lines. And the way you think about Apple is you brought up like the whole how it winks at you and stuff, and it will sort of add like a personality to the brand. And I was speaking with my friend Ross today, and he was saying that at the end of the day, all companies, like, there are always humans behind the companies, so there's always a personality, and it's like a combined personality of the people that have made that company, and trying to make that personality as to try and get your attention, to try and say, hey, look at me, I'm important, look at me. And I think we've started seeing it a little bit on LinkedIn, is what I've noticed, that people have started to animate their like profile pictures. So you'll see like agencies try and animate their profile. So when you're scrolling through, you see something moving. So it might just be like a little, like, let's say it's like a letter W, and the letter W will like draw itself on the screen. And then the actual post, because it's a social media post, the actual post might not be animated at all. And it's sort of like, but you're drawn to the brand, and then you look at the image, and it's sort of like a weird sort of like push and pull of like what you're looking at, what are you taking in, are you just remembering the name? I think think in terms of like animation, it's definitely going to see leaps and bounds within the next few years about how we bring our brands to life. What are your thoughts on that? Do you reckon animation will start to become more mainstream, perhaps?
I mean, from what I'm seeing, at least because I'm like 20 at the moment, so I'm getting towards a stage, at least with university, where I see a lot of people beginning to appreciate how animation is supposed to be like useful, particularly for graphic design. A lot of people, like you said, they look at animation and that's like the next stage, or like it's, you know, it may be difficult to learn, but in reality, using some of the basic principles we've already been studying for like God knows how long, just knowing that even if you like change the weight of a typeface and animate that could bring quite an impact to someone, even though it's quite simple. Or changing the colors into a certain rhythm of music, like that has another type of connection. Like, because there's so many branches of to animation, much like with graphic design, you have, web design, game design, even architecture is considered some form of graphics.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much visual communication as much as there is with animation. You have like traditionalist, which is like more Disney, or even within Disney and that sort of cartoon movie deck. There's things like Max Fleischer, which is very old school, rubber hose, very vintage. Obviously, the Disney, which is more realistic. But then there's even like experimental animations, which are just really absurd, but can also bring some charm to some adverts if they're used correctly. Like, there is so much tools that we can use with graphics animation that I think I think people will just start marrying like skills together. Like, if someone is primarily an illustrator who uses oils and they learn some basic sort of like concepts of like how to animate, they could create a short commercial using a skill or a medium that they like, and still create something of like a brand or even an advert. Just sort of speaking commercially, not so much like on an artistic level, because obviously with just being like a general artist, you can create whatever you want. There's no limit. But in terms of commercial and sort of businesses, like I'm seeing that they want more things that move. And obviously the quirkier your animation is, depending on your audience, obviously, it can make an impact. It's like, how Voxy has loads. I'm not sure if you've seen like the Voxy adverts that sometimes pop up.
Yeah.
There's like this phone brand is targeted more, I think, at like my demographic of like young students, because obviously, we use social media a lot, and just it suits us. They have like loads of box colors that just pop out, or even like Squarespace, like all their stuff is very well animated. Even though it may be really subtle, there's still some elements of animation, and it's just becoming more used to like incorporate some form of flow, and again, like organic feel to a company's brand or advert, because it generally does make it, like, for me, if I see an advert that's been animated, I appreciate it a little bit more, because I can see that the company actually understands that you don't just need to film people. Like, even just doing an animation can be quite charming, and in some cases really, really memorable. Like, I don't remember her name, but I know if I see that style, I know that I'll think of that particular ad. Like, I can't remember the name, but this ad that keeps popping up on YouTube, I think it's for this like what is it, project thing, but I always remember the type of illustration that they use and how they used animation within that particular advert. And I was like, if I see that, I'll watch it fully. Like, I'm not just going to turn off. I want to see what else they. So I generally think, at least with adverts, and obviously with them getting shorter and shorter, and people just wanting to like skip ads, I think animation would generally attract more attention than if it was just like someone just filming, because we've seen so much of that now. I think newer forms of animation that are developing, particularly with like digital and 3D medium, they seem to be attracting a lot more people to just watch it a little bit longer, which helps businesses in some way, and I think just generally help a lot of artists in general who want to get into animating, or even like are considering it as like it's a useful tool, even if they don't need to specialize in it. Just knowing the basic concept, or even like with logo animation, because we've already been talking about it. Most of the courses I've taken have said that logo animation is not so much about the planning of it, because obviously it's like 3 seconds most of the time. 3 seconds may be quite a bit, like if you're drawing traditional, but with digital, because the advantage of the tool, you can generate logos really quickly, like an animation for a logo quite quickly. It just then depends on how much flourish you want on it, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So obviously you can have like little swooshes that come out, little sparks or whatever. But to make a logo animation is quite simple in its essence, because you're just taking what's already been built and giving it more life. And that could be enough. If the client just wants something simple, it could be enough, and you could, do something that's still quite powerful. Even if all you did was literally just like trace an image to come to appear or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think it does hold a lot of power, even in the simplest form, at least from my experience.
Do you think that with that being said, do you think it's going to be more accessible for people to learn, and maybe easier for people to pick up? I don't know if there's like maybe a stigma behind animation right now where it's difficult, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I literally started animating like this time last year was when I first picked up animation in general. And I had no, like, my university, because I was mostly self-taught, like the stuff I'm doing on my Instagram particularly, all of that is mainly self-taught. All I got at uni was just like a workshop introduction into After Effects. And it was enough to like sort of get me interested, but what we sort of got was looking at some of the artists on it who were animating stuff, and I was like, I want to like start. And I think at the moment you have big websites now, or at least, yeah, because I think this time last year some of these were a little bit smaller, but things like School of Motion, Motion Design School, this Spanish-based one called Domestica, which has like English subtitles and some English artists or English-speaking artists. They've become so big, at least in the recent years, that they got courses, free content, and in YouTube, loads of people who have learned from these courses are then creating like their own journey. Like, at least for me personally, I've met quite a few people who've been sort of documenting their journeys through these courses, posting some basics on how to do basic concepts, how to do like really basic stuff that seems difficult but really isn't when you're taken through it. And once you have those tools, much like you first learn how to do like a good grid system in graphics, or you understand how to pair like typography together. Once you learn sort of those basic concepts, much like in graphics, you can live on it pretty quickly, and it sort of grows quite exponentially. Obviously, then at some points you feel like you're stagnating. But I think, I can't remember what I read it from, but there was a post or an article I was reading that basically said you may feel like you're stagnating, like like a normal roller coaster going up and down on how much you're progressing. But then that's what most digital skills, where you feel like you've reached the peak. But then obviously the more sort of stuff you learn, because most things are becoming now like in packages of courses that you can just buy and go through them. And then literally what most of them say at the end of the tutorials, or at the end of any of the like courses that you take, is experimentation. That's the main thing that they've suggested. But I think with most sort of creative subjects, particularly illustration, graphics, the best way to learn any of those is just to experiment and create your own stuff and see if you can do it. And obviously if you can't, there's communities nowadays, like Discord particularly. I know they can quite a lot of them. Well, I'm not sure how big, but there's quite a lot of YouTubers particularly that I follow that've got some specialized either Discord channels, or they've got specialized Skillshare like classes that they communicate regularly with, and that helps a lot, particularly as a beginner. If you're stuck on anything, you just post on the Discord or on their subreddits or on their YouTubes or wherever they communicate. They'll usually
There's so much
or something. Like I know some of like the bigger like motion design.
Yeah, there's so much content out there that you can just
at the moment, which is quite good. Years ago.
There's so much content out there that you can just literally just post stuff on, saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," or "I've designed this for a client. Here's the thought process behind it. Can you guys help me out with this?" And as the design industry right now, as it stands, is very sort of like, let's help each other out because we're struggling. We're all struggling, or everyone needs a bit of guidance every now and then. I think having that readily available to literally anybody, whether you're a seasoned expert or you're just picking up graphic design or animation for the first time, or fine art for the first time, whatever it might be, there's always going to be someone out there that's probably either been through what you've been through, or is willing to help you out and say, actually, okay, maybe have you thought about it this way? Have you tried taking this away to, try and look at things differently, and like in order to come to a best possible solution. A few days ago, I was in a portfolio review, just with an agency, and they were just looking at my portfolio, and I was talking through some of the projects that were in there. And one of the questions that came up was like, so since lockdown and COVID, what have you been doing to stay creative? And I was speaking about the 30-day Lego challenge, which I've spoken about on the podcast before, and also online courses and that sort of thing. And she was like, well, it's great that you are doing those sorts of things, because you've got to see this as like an opportunity to build on skills that you have, and also learn new ones as well, and try and keep that creative ball rolling, because it is, design is a muscle, and you have to flex it every now and then to make it go stronger. So I think that's just like really important about how people should just keep going, and also reach out to others and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or what do you think of this? Just turn this around for a client, what do you think? Because people will get back to you and they will give you their honest advice. So Luigi, how do you, is there a way that you stay inspired to keep up with either latest trends, or is there any particular artists that you look up to perhaps?
It varies, to be fair, because obviously this relates as well to the creative block, sort of aspect of getting inspired. Something that I also wanted to touch upon, like in relation to this, is the whole, is a thing sort of realize that helps me inspire, keeps me inspired, and stop me from getting like burnt out. Is again relating to getting help from other people, because I'm still in uni and I'm learning a lot about new things. So I have a group of people that are also in that same process.
Right.
The whole concept of collaboration has been heavily placed in our course, which, as much as obviously is not like the trendiest thing, or I'm not necessarily looking at particular artists, but that I'm bombarded with every day whenever I open Instagram or go on Pinterest, or even just anywhere that's social media where I any kind of artist, I'll get bombarded with that sort of inspiration. But personally, what keeps me going the most is the whole concept of collaboration. I've got a lot of friends who specialize more in illustration, friends who specialize more in filmmaking, or want to get more into poster design. Some who really, really love type, obsessively type or obsessively over one thing. And with those type of people, at least for me, because I'm more of a generalist, I can do a little bit of everything, but I really want to try and niche down a little bit more to lifting other people's artworks, bringing that to life, just using animation to bring their artwork to life, and trying to collaborate a lot with them to try and take what they've done and create something like that. So I've done a project where one of my friends, who is a type designer, he created a type, and he wanted me to create this sort of really angelic, using some Michelangelo paintings, and animate it as we're fading in from the sky and all that. So we worked on that project together, and it ended up looking quite cool. He was very happy with it, and that sort of got me thinking yo, this generally does give me they get a lot of happiness what's doing. I don't feel like crap. I don't feel like it's being forced. I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to just create work. And that sort of fluidity, I guess you could call it, of just collaboration, because obviously with most collaborations that aren't official or paid, is more you just have fun with it, you just explore. And which, again, relating back to the previous point of how to keep learning more accessibility of stuff, that whole process of experimentation. I've done some projects where I had no idea what I was doing, but at the end of it I learned something that I was like, oh, I wouldn't have gotten this if I wasn't trying this out. So it's that whole thing of just setting yourself challenges every day, again relating to creative block and as well for keeping inspired. They go hand in hand for me. Recently over the Christmas period, I caught COVID and I was off. I didn't want to think about designing anything for 2 weeks. I was like, oh, can't do it. So when I was trying to get back into drawing again, I was like, what can I set myself to try and complete? And one of my uni projects this year was that I had to document my first experience in some way. And I was like, well, I'm doing a lot of animation recently. I might as well do something animated. So that I literally, after it cleared and I was good to go again, I was picking up on some previous stuff where I was going out and sketching every day in the forest that's near me. And I was looking back for my sketches and I realized I could animate the squirrel. And that thing inspired me to then like try and see, how do I design this? How do I make it move? And it got me back in the flow of things, and now I've created something that I'm really happy with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sort of thing, like I generally talk to my friends about it and ask them like, what do you work that same way, or does it make sense? A lot of them do think that they also have that sort of thing where it's not necessarily following a trend that makes them happy. It's more if they want to solve something, that's what gets them going to begin with. And I've had teachers tell me that that's how they do it, because I've asked them. Well, a lot of them do say it's literally like, sit down and start drawing, make yourself as bored as possible, and just go for it. Like, start sketching one thing, think of a little problem, see if you like, move around, and just sort of keep in like free flow. And then that should keep you going, like, should keep you inspired. Obviously, people can burn out. Like, it's not perfect because everyone's life is a bit different. But if you do get a flow, it's always good just to keep doing something. Like you said, like designing is kind of like a muscle you have to keep using every now and then. Otherwise, I can't remember what I did like a month ago, and stuff like that. So it's always good to keep at it, even if it's like doing life drawing like 10 to half an hour or something, just to do something physical. Now that's the other thing. Doing physical work helps a lot more than digitally, because I know, at least from my experience in doing graphics, I started out, like, at least in college, we were pretty much taught to, just go for it, digitally, start ahead, load up, go and create stuff, blah, 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 blah. And by the end of like the session, inspired, I really don't like what I've done. It looks like shoddy. Don't like it. And I'd be like, oh, I don't like this. I'm not going to continue. I'm just going to quit it or not go at it again. And then I think as I developed through and I went into foundation more, my teachers basically told us, I don't want you using a computer until you've got some paper that you've experimented with excessively. Like I said, if you got like a design, like if you like, say if you got given 2 themes that were opposite, he was like, until you've tested out using some like magazine stuff, until you've done like acrylic, mixing up acrylics with something else as an opposite of an acrylic, and just getting really weird with the process of idea generation. It really helps with what the end product was, and that sort of kept me inspired. Obviously, these were like a school setting, but like it really taught me to, like, if I ever get a creative block and I need inspiration, it's just set myself some challenge and find as many solutions as I can to it, and just go for each one and see where they take me, rather than just like, okay, I'm going to go straight digitally and hope it works. So I'll go straight digitally, plan all digitally. Like, now, got to spend quite a bit of time away from the screen, prototyping, having fun with it, and that, in theory, should help you continue a project that you're stuck on. It's just, it's basically the essence of that. It's just make yourself a little bit bored, have some fun with it, get as crazy as you can, and then sort of narrow it down as you go through. But
it makes complete sense. I really liked that quote that you said, physical work over digital work. And there is something that when I was studying graphic design at A levels, I designed something on Photoshop. It was some sort of poster for a fictional travel brand, and I was like, speaking to my teacher about it, and I was like, I've made this, but I don't know how I've got here, sort of thing. Like I've got the finish line, but I don't have the start line. And to which point she then just moved the keyboard away from me and got like a fresh piece of paper and just went, okay, this what you've done is great. Okay, cool. You've designed something, but what? So I can see what you're saying. And then she literally just started to draw out what I'd had on the computer already, just with a pencil, and it looked nothing like it, but the basic elements were there, like where I had type on there. She was like just doing squiggly lines, and she was like, okay, so that's one idea. And she was like, and then let's do it again. And then she drew the same thing out again, but this time she moved one of the elements to the other side of the page and moved the type to the center of the page. And okay, how does that line up? It doesn't have to be exact details, but it was just like, here are the elements that you've got on the page, or just drawn out as a sketch. Do more sketches, and then go over to and it was something that was redefined at university, because they were like, it was part of the course not to use the computer for like a few modules for like ages, It's like, yes, use it for research and, you know, mood boards and images and color palettes and that sort of thing. But in terms of like physically designing something, you know, pencil and paper is the way to go for sure. Like, and don't even dare you touch the computer until you have something that you're sort of can work with from a piece of paper. And I think that's just like so important for people in the sort of like starting up. They don't know, they just think they can just jump onto Adobe Illustrator and just, you know, hash out a masterpiece. It's like it's not that like that at all. It's like, if anything, it's like 75% research, sketch, and actually understanding, and then the 25% of it is the visual stuff. And I think there's probably like a blurred line there which needs to be a little bit more redefined for people in the industry. You've spoken a little bit when you spoke about inspiration.
Well,
touched on
from that.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just gonna say, going on from the thing, I've noticed, you know how I'm gonna talk a little bit more like pricing real quick, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it. That's fine.
Sort of just, you know how freelance projects or whatever are sort of pricing. I was first out. I remember I was definitely undercharging. Like now from experience, I was definitely undercharging on prices. And I think the common misconception, at least with graphics or logos or even animation in general, is that people just look at it as the end product.
Yep.
A lot of people, at least a lot of clients, or at least like clients who haven't worked, they don't realize the amount of sketching, the amount of work and prep work that we do before we even send them off a digital file. Particularly with animation, it's very common in animation that a lot of the clients I've had, they go like, oh, why is the price like high? Like, what's your breakdown? So whenever I give them a breakdown of all the stages I go through, which one of my tutors he does like part-time uni and also like freelances as his in his own like mini studio thing. He literally told me, like, because I asked him, I've been losing clients because of prices, and it's like, break it down, because they may not necessarily understand what is involved in the process. They just want a logo. Like if I told you design me a logo, and I didn't say anything else, you'd probably be sending me sketches, probably be sending me like thumbnails, like color swatches to look at, comparing it on different colors. Like that's also part of the price and the process. A lot of people just don't see it or don't value it. Yeah. But if you took that away, like you could just end up doing a logo that an AI nowadays can probably, if that makes sense. Because I've had this, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but nowadays that we have, computers that can basically create logos, like with Wix and its logo making, logos being able to be produced a lot cheaper. The only reason why someone would go for a more bespoke choice is because of that process. That's what essentially we're charging people for. The amount of time that we're taking to sort of like do thumbnail sketches, to do sort of any sort of prep work that will get them, or in animation, like doing storyboarding, doing then the animatics for it, the styling frames for it, and the reiterations of each of those, because obviously it's like a back and forth process. Like it's a little bit like dance. You send them off things, they like it, you rearrange it, you come back, and it's just a bit of a back and forth, and you move on to the next step. And if anything obviously goes wrong, you always have a previous backup. So then again, you save some time. So I think in terms of that aspect of trying to move away from the computer, or at least the final outcome, and try and spend as much time preparing for it, is better. Because I've had some projects where, say I spend about 3 weeks planning it, 1 week making it. Because once you have some of the basic skills to know how to make it, it's quite quick to make it. You can probably make like a poster or a logo within a day or two. But to plan for that a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people forget hard for, at least when they're starting out freelancing or even trying to, get into an agency or whatever. They don't realize that the whole process of getting to that logo is worth just as much as the final outcome. Yeah. And that's like, at least personally, that's how I've been sort of taking it. Like whenever I do any project, make sure that I understand that my time preparing for that, like even like the initial calls, we can probably spend up to an hour discussing what their vision is, what they're actually planning, and trying to get in depth of everything. I'm going to sort of guide them carefully through the process so that we're always on the same page. Because it's like, you can have some clients that are like, oh yeah, no, make the font bigger, but you're like, it won't do anything. Like that's not, we're not on the same page. Some clients just wanted a different color because they fancy it, and it's like, as we talked about before, your plan was to do this, and then I will, like, this is what will suit it better. So there's that whole thing of trying to keep your client on board, continually educating them on the process as well, because it may be new to them, at least depending on what type of business they're on. I've had some that wanted to go a certain direction, but I was like, oh no, I recommend this. Like, you know, looking back on some of the notes we talked about, you said you wanted this and this is that. And so showing the previous work as it can really help build rapport with the client particularly, and also just give more value to the work you've already done, rather than just having as like quick sketches you did on the train, and then the final thing and just the starting everything done. All that, much like, I don't know how you guys call it, but you know, like visionaries or module files or workbooks, you know, like in uni, we have to like fill out books and document your entire process. All that is basically what is actually worth in a project, is the final piece. Yeah, that is basically my sort of take on that aspect of, you know, client-based stuff and pricing, just in general. The process is as important for me as the final outcome of it.
Yeah, I've definitely had clients in the past. Well, actually, recently when I did someone, he's a musician. I did a logo for him, and it was like, initially he just asked me if I could redo his logo, and I was like, I can redo your logo. However, I need you to answer. I need answers to these questions that I'm going to send you, because it will not only will it help you understand it, will also help me understand what's best and what is actually needed. And I think one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite designers called Paula Scher, who designs for Pentagram. She says, I feel my job is quite important because I have to teach people how to see. And what she means by that is that she's teaching people on how to understand on what they're actually looking at, right? Yeah. So if she's presenting a logo to someone, she needs to help them understand why she's made this decision based on conversations that they've had. Because 9 times out of 10, the client might say they want a whole new brand identity, but actually what they're saying is, I need a brand identity that sticks to these core values and is in this particular color way and is laid out in this particular style, because it then backs up everything that we've just spoken about. And I think that's really important for both client and designer to understand. And I think you made some really good points there, just about like how people view the design industry right now. They just see it for face value of a finished logo, a finished packaging design, a finished poster. If you want a house built, you don't pay for just the actual house. You pay for the planning, you pay for the land that it's built on, you pay for the walls, that the installation of the walls, you pay for the plumbing, you pay for the electricity, and you move in, you pay for Wi-Fi, you pay for gas and electric every month. And it's more than just the house. It's actually a whole package, if you like, of what goes into building a house. As terrible as that analogy is, I'm going to stick with it. So moving on a little bit.
It makes sense.
Good.
It makes sense.
It's all right. You've spoken a little bit about getting into sort of like a little bit about your process and how you approach certain things and tackling creative block and staying inspired. Is there a way that you sort of get into a creative mode? Because you mentioned like a little bit about getting bored and then having fun. Is that always the case, or is it like, okay, put in some music and then sit down and try and like do some sketches perhaps, or do some storyboarding, or what is that process like for you, and how do you get into that sort of flow state, if you like?
I'm not gonna lie, it does vary. Because some days you really just want to get music straight on and just do stuff, because it could be like a really mundane aspect of it and you just want to do that. You may not feel very creative, at least you get the work done. It really depends on what I want to achieve by the end of like a creative state, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because it would be like if I wanted to create like a new character or something, I may not necessarily like just put music on and just listen to stuff. Like I may literally sort of close myself in, no music, no distractions, just sort of, let the idea brew for a bit. I could even go for a walk, essentially. Like sometimes I literally just go for a walk or I sleep it off for a bit. Just try and like constantly have it on the front of my mind or in the back of my mind, or depending how you want to view it. Just constantly have like the thought running, like how can I solve this problem or how can I go about this? And then every now and then look at something, say like a bit of inspiration on Pinterest, something. Try an idea, leave it there, trying to like take in what works, what isn't, even get some feedback on it, and then just continue going like that. Just going for iterations and prototyping helps to generate more ideas, and that usually gets me into a state of sort of like creativity. I'm like, oh yes, I know what I'm doing, let's go. But like personally, like it can be affected by different things. Like obviously, some days you could be a lot happier, some days you're just really tired and can't get into it. It's fine in my opinion. Like not every day has to be a super. But, yeah. Well, anyway, particularly at the moment, it's a lot harder to try and get into sort of like a creative state when we just want to like sleep and just hope it all goes away. But
yeah,
I've generally found that trying to keep. Oh no, I'm trying to move away from like the depressive aspect of what the situation at the moment is. But I've generally sort of taken into account, and I think some other like Instagram like, well, they're not really like influencers. They're like business people that I follow that have generally said like they don't go out at 7 o'clock in the morning every single day to like get into a state. They don't go on like doing exercise for like 3 hours. Like they generally like is listening to the body and seeing how you're feeling, and then seeing if it's possible to actually just go and try and get into it, or if you need like a little bit more time to sort of think about it. Because some days you're not going to come up with anything. Like I'm not going to lie. Some days you will literally be like, I can't think of how to solve this. And that's all right, because it's not like you're going to have one project all the time. You may have like 10 different projects that you're trying to solve. At least if you're freelancing, you've got to have to keep projects coming in. So the best way to do it, if you can't solve one problem one day, you come back to it another day and just do something else that's either different. Even if you have like a hobby that you want to take, like, going out for, like if you like hiking, running, doing sports, or, creating toys or cakes, or I don't know. Like trying to do something different that isn't necessarily going online, because like I know this may be going on a tangent, but like recently I've realized, at least for me and for a lot of other my friends, we're spending a lot more time. Yeah, I think we're all a lot on like Netflix, a lot more probably scrolling through the internet, and I think that personally for me, I feel that affected me a little bit on how I get into a state, because I'm like, I'll just scroll through Instagram, see for inspiration, but I'm really not there for inspiration. I just want to mindlessly scroll for a bit and turn my brain off. But I realized a more like effective way of trying to procrastinate effectively is going for a walk. That's helped me so much at least in this like month where I've had to sort of recover a bit from it. I realized like going out for walks, or just going out for longer walks to procrastinate has helped a lot more to get into a flow when I get back home. Because I come back home a little bit, I feel a little bit energized. I've gone through, even if I'm listening to music whilst walking, or just, just hearing whatever I can, or it's helped me open my eyes a little bit. Hence with that project I was talking about earlier, where I was like in the woods, sketching stuff. I honestly would just go there during my, like after like lunch or something like that, walk for about an hour, just stand in the woods doing nothing, just like seeing what's out there. And then I saw like, oh, there's a squirrel. Squirrels are cool. Let's draw one. And that gave me the inspiration then for one of the things. And then I got into it from that. I had something to go on. So like, again, going back to the creative block, or even just trying to get inspired and keeping in that flow, it's like, if I ever reach a roadblock in any project and I want to continue that sort of thing, I would, just take the break, because obviously sometimes the human body or people in general may be affected differently by different things, and just want to take some time off. It's like, it's cool. You can just go for a walk. I'm using that more because it helps me a lot.
Yeah.
Walking around, just like no direction in mind, just mindlessly walking, helps me a lot to sort of like think about what I need to do. And then by the time I'm back, I feel a little bit more happier with what I'm doing. And when I get back into it, I get for a flow for like the next 2 or 3 hours or something like that. And then I probably need to sleep, but who knows? It's just I always go with a little bit of a fluidity to my stuff. I don't try to necessarily plan my stuff anymore. Like I used to have like a really rigid thing, like, oh, from this hour to this hour, I'll try and get this done. For me personally, it doesn't always work. It only works for me when I know exactly what I need to do and I have an already solved, if that makes sense. So it really does depend on what I'm trying to achieve again, because it could be like, if I'm trying to solve a problem, going with the flow helps a lot more, because my mind is, more open. I'm allowing myself to explore different avenues or different solutions. But if I already have like a sort of, I need to animate this, or it's more specific instructions, like change the color, change that, I will set myself a specific time to try and complete it in, because then that allows me to, go like, okay, so I'm gonna move this leg here and make sure the leg is all fixed. All that's done. I'm gonna do this because all these problems have already been solved. So it just gets me into like a state where I'm just fixing errors, correcting stuff, adjusting stuff, and then it looks good. At least in that day, it looks good to me. Obviously, I can come back the next start again.
Yeah.
But that's like process that we're talking about before. Even if I have to scrap it, I've already got backups that I can then try again. And then go back to the state where, okay, I'm just going to let it flow, let the idea stew for a while, go for a walk, go for a run, do some exercise, or just sleep or eat. I don't know. Depends what people like to do. And then, as you know, it's just that once you've got the solution that you want to try out, you sort of step it out a little bit so you've got some idea where to go, and then, do it. And that's how it's been for me at the moment. But then again, that's just me. A lot of people may have different approaches. They might have different philosophies. I know some people work more to a schedule, and that's what they prefer, which obviously, if it works for them, there's not much to fix there. If it works, it works. But personally, for me, I've enjoyed more going with the flow. And then once I've got a solution, planning it out vaguely, so I know at least where I'm going if I ever need to come back to it later. And obviously, just in general, it's like keeping a diary saying, yeah, I've done this, done that. If I look back on a project that's old, I'll know which steps I did or which steps I could have done better. So it's, that's pretty much how it is. Just documenting as I, just in case I forget what I've done.
Awesome. Lots of things there to take in, and just about processes, going for walks, coming back and then hating your work and then starting all over again. The amount of times that I've come back to, like, gone on a lunch break and then come back to my computer and be like, well, this is shit, better move on, and then just completely either started again, or, but coming back and just looking with some fresh eyes is like pretty key to like just how I look at my work. Is just make sure other people have seen it as well, just so is there anything that I've completely missed because I've been looking at it for so long. I think one tip that I was told by an illustrator I know is that if you flip your artwork every now and then, so it like flips horizontally, so everything's facing the wrong way, it helps you sort of like pinpoint things that you might not have seen when it was facing the other way, which is a nice way to work and like a nice easy way around it. Was a little bit of a tip. I'm going to move on to the recommendation section of the podcast. So my book recommendation this week is Do Design by Alan Moore, which is part of the Do Book Co. If you've heard of the Do lectures and that sort of thing, they do lectures about design. Like there's some about jam and chutney making. It's just a lot of like creative processes and how to be the best you possibly can at doing them. And there's like a few practices in here. So the subtitle of the book, I should say, is Why Beauty is Key to Everything. And it's an idea of appreciating design and appreciating how all things around us have been made in a specific way for a specific reason. And just thinking about like from the material it's made of to the texture that you can see on it to, the different color variants that are in it. And one of the things that Alan Moore says is that you should go schedule a go-see. So if there's a brand that you really like or something that you really appreciate and you have the ability to actually experience it, then go ahead and go see. It's literally called a go-see because you literally go and see the workings. And he really liked when Yo Valley, the yogurt company, rebranded. And was just really interested in behind the brand. So he emailed the CEO, and 2 days later, the CEO got back to him, and then he went and saw the farms and the factories and everything that was going on behind the scenes. And it was weird for him because it was like, well, the CEO, why would he give any of his time to me? And it's like, but he has literally someone's taken an interest in what he does and what he's built, and therefore is wanting to share it. I just thought that was really nice. There's also a few other things in here about like questions that you should ask of your idea, and the philosophy of ing. So it's like whatever it may be. Like, so a few that he recommends in here is like playing, making, baking, coding, crafting, guiding, and then at the bottom of the page goes, what is your ing? So everyone's got that ing that they do, that they practice, that they believe in. And it's just all about finding what that ing is and how you can do that to your best possible ability. So Luigi, you've got something to share with us today as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got many recommendations, but because obviously this is more about the animation side of stuff, or at least, it's what I'm at the moment. I was going to recommend the Bible for animation, which is called The Animator's Survival Toolkit. I think it's by Richard Williams, who was one of the art directors for Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
The book is, like I said, it's just everything you need to know about animation functions. Like, no matter what scope of animation you're in, whether it's 3D, 2D, experimental, traditional, or any other of the in-between sort of stuff, it shows you how the history, at least from his side, of how he got into like work for Warner Brothers and met loads of really, really famous like Disney animators and Warner Brothers animators back in like the 90s, 80s, and like even before that. And he sort of teaches you what they taught him with some like great examples. Like, I know the first lesson in the book, he says, is stop listening to music. Like, he has like an entire like 2-page thing saying to people, whenever you're animating, particularly, listen to music, because when you listen to music, you may just like go with the flow, or it could alter how you view something. He had a very particular way of explaining, which I can't remember off by heart. But what I found quite funny was how he said when he tried it, it sort of liberated the way he was animating, and he was a lot freer. He said his animation was a lot better. I tried to put this into practice, and at least for like a week where I managed to, cope with it, it was like, oh, I'm animating a lot faster. I'm solving a lot faster because I'm not focusing so much on the song, or I'm not changing songs, or, leading to procrastination because I'm, on Spotify just searching for songs. The whole thing was just being like in a room, and, how I think he was saying the whole thing of trying to get a bit bored. It really did help to like look at the animation differently, or to play with it a bit more. So that first lesson was like what really hooked the book. And then from then on, he goes into such depth and just detail on doing the basics of walk cycles, giving you like really, really structured tutorials and pretty much everything, to even to the point where he teaches you like how animals move and books that you should read around that. There's a load of sources to external animations, external books that you should read. So it's got a lot for one book, and it's worth the price. I think it's a bit costly. It's about like 50, I think, around, but it's worth everything. Like, it taught me everything, at least for this month where I've been doing a lot more traditional animation. It's taught me everything on it, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. It all clicked. The way the book explains everything, it all clicks. It all makes sense, and it really helped. Even though I do more like I don't do necessarily traditional animation as he teaches. The same principles apply to everything, and even to logo design, which obviously is completely different to something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like the similar concepts of having sort of flexibility, or changing the shapes, or giving personality to things by just tweaking a couple of things. It really helps to like boost up any animation, whether you're like a beginner or even like quite good at it. It's something that even I think some people have been doing it for years still refer to for inspiration. So yeah, that's my book, which is The Animator's Survival Toolkit.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm going to definitely seems like even if you're not an animator, it seems like there's a few things in there that, like, as creatives, are pretty solid like advice. The whole not listening to music. A book that I recommended on the podcast before, and I've spoken a little bit about as well in previous podcasts, is Hecate on Creativity. And one of the chapters in there is about headphones, and he was saying like, if I see people that come into the studio and they've got their headphones in, I'm thinking that that's a wasted opportunity, because what that's doing is it's forcing you to listen to the music rather than actually look around and actually appreciate what's going on around you. And maybe you'll miss like a poster on a bus, on the side of a bus, or maybe someone's coat, they've got a certain color on their coat or something like that, and that inspires you to do something. So it's sort of like switching on to the world around you and switching off from the technology in front of you. I think is kind of interesting on how that affects us, and how we can sort of especially in creative ways, and just what we might miss in just day-to-day life if we just don't have headphones in and that sort of thing. So Luigi, you spoke a little bit before we started this podcast about going into public speaking. Can you speak a little bit about your experience with that? Was that something creative based, or was it something different?
I mean, it was something along the journey. It was more to do with like sort of computer science, because I started off like in at least in secondary school, I started like my own sort of computing programming club. It wasn't anything specific like to teach. It was just more of like an environment. Well, I guess the reason that started was just like the whole thing of collaborative spaces, like I was talking about before.
Yeah,
I wanted to create like a collaborative space where people would come in and do stuff. And then that led me to some contacts. And then I did like some public speaking stuff where I was speaking to a group of other computer programmers about that whole process and what it was all about. So yeah, it didn't lead to like anything like big, but it was part of the process and journey that helped me sort of develop why I do what I do. Like, because even when I was more of a computer science, like, trying to specialize within that, a lot of the things that I wanted to do was because I wanted to communicate and, build a collaborative environment. Which now, as an animator / graphic designer, I mean, they're all the same to me, but it's so prevalent nowadays. Like, because obviously, if you want to specialize in animation or graphics, you're going to have a sub specialization in it. Like, I do animation, but I also specialize within like 2D motion graphics. So I move graphics about. I don't necessarily do character animation, or I don't necessarily do type animation. And with graphics, like originally, I wanted to do like poster or advertising or branding. I was deciding between that. So there's so much overlap and so much to learn and specialize in. Then it's like, you don't have time for that. Particularly if you want to build like this or an agency or go freelance, you won't have time to necessarily learn all those skills. So that's why I was like, well, the best way to do that, build a collaborative space or collaborative like sort of agency where you can either hire people or have people come in to help you out. Like I have friends who are specialized, like I said before, in illustration, specialized in filmmaking, some who do music or sound design. And I help them sort of like come in and, I show them this is what I'm doing. Can you help me out? And I can return the favor, and that's the sort of thing we're at. So the whole thing with public speaking was built around the concept of collaborative spacing. So yeah, that was basically the whole history of it.
Yeah.
Well, brief history of it anyway.
I like that you're always referring back to the idea of collaboration, and it seems to be like a core value that it's built upon. From computer science to now like working together with people and creating spaces where people can collaborate and can work on things together and can share things and be in a comfortable space. I think that's really unique of what you're doing. I've not heard any creative in a while sort of speak about it, especially as you have. So thank you very much for sort of being so vocal with that. And yeah. So final question then for you, Luigi, is that
no, mate, collaboration very much.
So my final question for you is, what would you say to a animator or motion designer, maybe following in your footsteps a little bit? What would you say to them, like as a single piece of advice?
Oh, that's difficult. Main thing is, it's just don't be scared to fail. I think that's the main thing I think you can tell any creative. Is the most. I know it's a bit generic, but a lot of people do think that the first animation looks shit, and it probably will. Like, I'm not going to showcase it. I know my ones, looking at my ones, I'm like, oof, they weren't good. But that's part of the process. So it would be that don't expect to be good again. Have fun failing and just experiment as much as possible. That's the one thing I kind of regret not doing any earlier, was having fun with After Effects, because I thought like, oh, I need to learn the next tutorial. Next tutorial is like, take your time with it. Some people learn it quicker, some people learn it slower, some people get it quicker, some people, you know, later understand how to do a walk cycle, for example. But the main thing that kept going, or at least for me, was, like I said before, the whole experimentation and having fun with it. So it's trying to let go of any fear of failure and view it more as, okay, it's a failed experiment, doesn't matter, move on. I can't remember, I think there's as for recommendation, there's another book, if you don't mind me adding onto the list.
Yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah.
War on Art, which I think specifically tackles that aspect where failure should not be seen as something bad. It's more, take it in, learn from it, and just move on immediately. Otherwise, you're going to be like stuck in the same loop, which also relates back to the creative block thing that we were talking about, where it's just come back to it, if it's bad, scrap it, try again. So I definitely think that, at least with animation, because animation has such specifics sometimes that it can be like, oh, why doesn't it look good? Oh, I'm bad animator. It's like, you're not bad, you just need more practice, or you just need to experiment different ways to try and, you know, resolve it in a different way. So yeah, it's try. Well, I say try. It's just learn to let go of failure as being bad and view it more as like a learning experience. I think that's the way you say it.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that, Luigi. And with that, I'm going to close off the podcast. So, Luigi, thank you very much for joining me today and talking about your experiences and just generally about the design industry and about where it's going and the different various different aspects of that. You've handled yourself very well. Like you're a very confident speaker, so really nice articulated points, and just yeah, thanks. So thank you for sharing it in such detail. For all the listeners, if you haven't done so already, you can go ahead and follow us on at Life Proof UK across all social medias. So that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all the good stuff, for job opportunities, networking, podcasts such as this one. And yeah, so hopefully you can all stay safe. Luigi, thanks again for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.